Welcome to the broadcast, everybody. I hope you had an absolutely fabulous weekend. I certainly did. And I commemorated Poppy Day yesterday, Remembrance Sunday, like many of you. And it's over now, so I didn't want to come to you wearing a poppy today and dressed in black to keep that sombre mood, but it was absolutely perfect timing because I trotted down to the vintage fair this morning, not with the intention of buying anything, just to have a catch-up and a cosy little gossip with second-hand Susie over a coffee, which we did. But then, out the corner of my eye, came this plate of poppies. £7, and I thought it was absolutely perfect. Don't you? And it put to work our new butler, Harold, because I wasn't sure how I was going to present it to you. I don't have anything to mount it on. And there was Harold, crouching there. And it fit absolutely perfectly, so... what a lovely find. And I think it's rather a common piece. I did look it up. It's called the Papavero d'Oriente, Oriental Poppy, in fine biscuit porcelain, going for £7. So I was very happy with that find. But for those of you who might want to purchase something a little more exclusive and a little bit more expensive, guess what? You're in luck, because... how much would you spend for a night with Meghan Markle? A £5? Well, no, my dear. It will cost you $1 million. $1 million. $1 million for a night with Meghan. Yes, it can be yours. You can buy a ticket, like An Indecent Proposal, featuring Maggie Moore, Harry Harrelson, and Robert Redhead. Take a gamble, Rachel. Kiss the dice. This gala takes place around the same time that the Waleses hit Boston for the Earthshot Awards, this Cripple of Hope affair. And previous recipients of the awards and honours, as we've discussed before, include Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and now the Harkles are to be honoured, and as part of their pioneer package for $1 million. Only $1 million, you get 4 seats at the top table, and it's hosted by Kerry Kennedy. But for those of you that are poor, never fear, dear peasants, because for just half that, you can attend a VIP reception. You don't get top table, but you can attend a reception, and they might be there. Well, and also it's going to be hosted by Alec Baldwin, of all people. I didn't think that would go down particularly well with this kind of woke set after the year that he's just had, but apparently, well, you couldn't make it up, could you? Alec Baldwin presiding over the ceremony. And it's not just us that seem to be baffled, and obviously it's not just involving Meghan, it's Harry and all the other attendees there, so I'm not laying the blame at their doorstep. But the media have been getting their knickers in knots over this, because lots of people are asking the question why they are receiving these honours. For example, Professor David Nassau, the author of the Pulitzer Prize-nominated book The Patriarch, which was about Kennedy. And he said, I find it somewhere between sublimely ridiculous and blatantly ludicrous. It's absurd. If you look at the people who've been awarded the Robert Kennedy Prize in the past, the Clintons, Nancy Pelosi, and Bishop Desmond Tutu, and then you have to ask, what are Harry and Meghan doing there? The mind boggles. What in God's name have they done to merit this? What percentage of Harry and Meghan's wealth is going to worthy causes? And he said that the patriarch of the Kennedy clan, Joe, who was a staunch Irish Catholic, would be turning in his grave to see branches of his family latching on to British royalty. And a Hollywood producer was quoted in the Mail as saying, everyone's been scratching their heads to try and figure out the reason why Harry and Meghan have chosen to receive this while they are still in the early stages of their philanthropic work. That was always my objection. I've no doubt that they're doing some good deeds. I've no doubt that they're benefiting various causes and initiatives out there, but I don't understand why they're getting so decorated, so awarded, and so highly praised at the fledgling stage of this entity known as Archewell. But, of course, the devil's always in the detail, isn't it, my dear? And the director of their new venture, At Home with the Harkles, to appear on Netflix in the not-too-distant, is being directed by Liz Garbus, who is together in a film company with none other than Rory Kennedy, who is the youngest of Robert F. Kennedy's 11 children. 11 children! Ooh, tut tut tut! They need to go through the travel checklist with Harry and Meghan to make sure that they only reach a maximum of 2 children. Like the Harkles, 11 is very globally irresponsible. Naughty. Many happy returns of the day to King Charles, who turned 74 years old today. Thank you, Your Majesty, for a life of service to all of us here in the kingdom and beyond. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we are so proud of the absolutely brilliant start that you've gotten off to during these first few weeks of your reign. Absolutely incredible. He'll be marking the day privately, but he was treated to a rendition of Happy Birthday by the Scots Guards, and there'll be gun salutes throughout the day and all kinds of goings on. Now, you may remember that the late Queen, in a tradition that stems back to the 1700s for the monarch, had her birthday and then an official birthday, which was on a different date in the summer, which tied in with the Trooping the Colour and the Queen's birthday honours. There's no decision announced yet as to whether Charles will continue on with that tradition, which is especially relevant to monarchs whose birthday doesn't fall in the summer months. If it falls during the winter, especially, they hang on until the more glorious weather to give them an official birthday. So there's been no decision on that at the moment. I must admit there's something in me that finds it a little bit silly, or the notion of celebrating the King's birthday, 6, 7, 8 months after it actually is. I'm not sure that translates very well to modern day ritual, but then again it's a shame to lose the tradition. But we have been treated to a truly lovely photograph of the King next to a beautiful, majestic tree as he officially becomes Park Ranger of Windsor Great Park, 70 years after his father was appointed to the post. The Ranger offers oversight and guidance to the Deputy Ranger and his team in the day-to-day stewardship of one of the country's oldest estates. This is traced back to 1559, the reign of Elizabeth I, when Sir Henry Neville became Park Ranger, and the Duke of Edinburgh was the longest-serving Ranger from 1952 to his death in 2021. And Philip oversaw developments like the reintroduction of red deer into the deer park in 1979, and lots of developments in the Savile Garden Visitors Centre, which is a riot of colour, and the Virginian Water Pavilion. And speaking of making a splash in the water, have you been reading the headlines of old Mickey Tindall? Smuggling budgies he was, in those budgie smugglers. Skimpy swimwear. He stripped off to reveal that hunky frame and some skimpy bathing pants for a dip in the Camp Creek in more ways than one. And the press have been jokingly asking if they're Zara's bikini bottoms that he donned, but I think that's a little bit far-fetched, but who knows? The mind boggles. But in more sober and serene and royal goings-on, we were treated to an absolutely immaculate weekend of special occasions, focusing on Remembrance Sunday and war veterans. At the Royal British Legion's Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall, we saw a wonderful lineup of senior royals, and Catherine was sombre in black, with Queen Elizabeth's pearl choker there and drop earrings, looking exquisite. That choker, by the way, was said to have been commissioned by the Queen, and she received pearls from Japan during a state visit there in 1975. And I'm sure many of you spotted Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson there, who's becoming a regular fixture and feature as a query to the King. And it's almost like he's there in place of where Haribo should have been. I grant you he's better looking than Haribo, so it's a bit more eye candy than what we might have gotten out of that dandelion affair. It's a shame, isn't it, that they can't do a little switch like the Prince and the Pauper. I think that would have made everybody far more happy. Ditch the witch and make the switch. But it was a truly moving service that paid a wonderful tribute to the Queen, and you could see that it moved the King and his family. And yesterday, on Remembrance Sunday, the King led the nation for the annual commemorations at the cenotaph. The tradition dates back to 1920 and the reign of King George V, who originally unveiled the cenotaph. The King laid his wreath as a mark of respect in this flawless ceremony. No eggs were chucked, let it be noted. They didn't dare throw eggs, but I wouldn't put it past some of these fools and cretins. But there was no interference, and the King was watched by his consort and the Princess of Wales from the balcony where the Queen stood. And they dealt with that matter very effectively because they didn't want there to be some hullabaloo about who was going to replace the Queen in that particular spot, because for the last few years, I think since about 2017, she had ceased placing the wreath herself. You know, she was in her 90s, and she had begun watching from the balcony. Well, now we have the Queen and the Princess, who make such a fabulous twosome, very respectful of each other, and oversaw the proceedings. Catherine's earrings, of course, absolutely divine, and you can see them here worn by Diana. It fell to Wessex to give the salute. Again, the King's equerry was seen on duty, and Sophie's brooch was really quite something, paired with a simple string of pearls. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester were also seen doing their part. DZ5 says, I've just read that Hugh Vickers has reported that the Duke of Edinburgh sought legal advice because of the Crown's storyline on his sister's death. I haven't seen much of the Crown, and this is exactly why. Yes, I know it's fiction, but this sort of thing just makes it cruel. Yes, absolutely, my dear, I read that myself. Well, indeed, many of you may remember and recall that in The Crown, in the opening series, it harks back to 1937 because Prince Philip experienced a lot of tragedy and heartbreak and grief in his formative years, really, although he seemed to have conquered all of his demons and ghosts of the past with an aplomb rarely seen. Anyway, one of his sisters, his beloved sister Princess Cecily, died in 1937 in the most horrific plane disaster you can really imagine. It came down in fog when it hit a chimney, and when it crashed, they discovered that the child that she'd been pregnant with, her fourth child, had been delivered on the plane before it crashed. So the body of that infant was found alongside her husband, and two sons. But the way they chose to portray this in The Crown, which is entirely unfathomable, I mean, it's dramatic enough without any embellishments, isn't it? I think this is the thing that grinds the gears of many of us. It's dramatic enough as its own truth without embellishing it. Well, they seemed to put a spin on it in The Crown that the deaths were blamed on Prince Philip by his father and the family. In the scene, they had his father, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, saying, I'm surprised he dare show himself here. Had it not been for Philip and his indiscipline, she would never have taken that flight. It's true, isn't it, boy? You're the reason we're all here burying my favourite child. Get him out of here. I mean, the cruelty of this beggars belief. Remember, this was released while Philip lived and breathed. And as I've said before, I believe in giving total artistic freedom to anybody out there, even if it's disparaging. I don't think that you should restrain artistry in that manner. What I do have a huge problem with was the lack of disclaimer at the time. They may say it's obvious that it was fiction. It wasn't obvious to many people. Many people were watching The Crown in their millions, thinking that it was documenting goings-on that at least had a root in reality, rather than just absolute lies. And, you know, we're speaking about a death that hurt Prince Philip in the most profound way. He was close to his sister. He was informed of his sister's death in the headmaster's study. He was called in and told, and he said, I have the very clearest recollection of the profound shock with which I heard the news of the crash and the death of my sister and her family. Well, we're told by Hugo Vickers, who knew Philip, that Philip had consulted the family lawyers, Farrer and Co. They've advised the royal family since the 1930s. And he said, I know Prince Philip consulted his lawyer about it to ask, what can I do about it? He was very upset the way that he was portrayed. He was human. He could be hurt like anybody else. Now, I also hear that he tells us that the Queen and Prince Philip didn't actually sit down and watch an episode of The Crown. They refused to watch it. So I'm not quite sure if they watched a little bit of it to get to know this, but from what I hear, no, they refused point blank, but heard what the synopsis was, what the suggestions were. But in the end, Philip chose not to pursue legal action, and the long-held royal mantra of never complain, never explain prevailed. Quick question here from Cordelia Adams. I love the name Cordelia, by the way. I have a question. Does William keep his Duke of Cambridge title, or does he lose it on becoming Prince of Wales? He keeps it, but it's also now the Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge. Same for Catherine. She's the Duchess of Cornwall and Cambridge. What a mouthful, eh? But luckily he was also created Prince of Wales shortly afterwards, so that is what we'll refer to him as, because it's the grander title. But yes, now it includes Cornwall and involves the Duchy of Cornwall, which he is set to preside over, as his father did. BRT raises an interesting point about the egg attack on King Charles, and as I said, loads of people might think it's funny to hear about various foodstuffs being chucked at anybody. I never find it at all amusing or funny to even think about. It doesn't matter whether it's King Charles or Meghan Markle, if anyone actually threw anything at them or anybody else. In my opinion, it is assault and inexcusable. You don't throw things at other human beings. Concerning the egg incident, what if it hit someone with an egg allergy? My niece is deathly allergic to them and could have gone into anaphylactic shock from just a drop of the stray splash. This is the sort of issue that little toads like this heckler either do not take into consideration or just do not care about. Quite, my dear, quite. Hundreds upon thousands of people out there have allergies, serious allergies. You hear about these people that die in aeroplanes where the same air is circulating just from somebody opening a bag of nuts. And you hear about this on a daily basis. How absolutely thoughtless, because that is just one other injury that could occur from a food attack. As you say, if he had had the same condition as your niece, he could have dropped down with an anaphylactic shock and died. And then, what sort of charge would this boy be facing, this tyke? Manslaughter? Attempted murder? Take your pick, my dears. Doesn't seem quite as comedic and fun and silly then, does it? Well, it was fun to catch up with you, my fruits, and have a little chinwag, and I look forward to seeing you in the next broadcast. Have a splendid evening, and I'll see you next time. Toodle pip.